Some stories find you at exactly the right moment. This is one of them. What you are about to read is the kind of story that will make you forget you had somewhere to be. The kind that makes your heart beat a little faster and your eyes move quicker down the page because you simply cannot wait to find out what happens next. This is not just a story about a yacht party. It is not just a story about a jealous ex-boyfriend who could not let go. This is a story about a woman who spent years being quietly told she was nothing, and one single unforgettable night when the entire world proved him devastatingly, completely wrong. A man walked onto the most beautiful night of her life, picked up her champagne glass, and poured it slowly over her head in front of 40 people. He was drunk. He was arrogant. He was absolutely certain he still had power over her. He smiled while he did it. He looked around at the crowd to make sure everyone was watching. What he did not know, what he could not have prepared for in 1,000 lifetimes, was who was already standing across that deck. Who her husband actually was. And what was already, quietly, inevitably, moving in his direction. By the time you reach the very last line of this story, your jaw will be on the floor. Every single word between here and there is worth staying for. Before we go any further, drop your location in the comments right now. Tell me your city, your country, what time it is where you are. I read every single comment and I love knowing where in the world my readers are. And if you have not subscribed to this channel yet, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notifications. You do not want to miss a single story like this one. Now, let us get into it. The yacht was lit up like something out of a dream. White lights ran the full length of every railing, spilling their reflection onto the dark water below like a trail of scattered stars. The music was soft but warm, the kind that fills the air without demanding anything from you. The kind that makes a night feel like it has no hard edges. I was standing on the upper deck in a white dress I had saved 3 months to buy, holding a glass of champagne I had not yet touched, and I was laughing. Really laughing the full kind, with my whole chest, completely unguarded, at something my colleague Dana had just said. I felt beautiful. I felt present. I felt, for the first time in longer than I could honestly recall, like the version of myself I actually recognized. That was the exact moment I heard his voice cut through the music like something sharp. Well, look at you. I did not need to turn around. 2 years had passed since that voice had been directed at me, but some sounds do not fade the way they should. They live in your body long after they should have gone, like a splinter you stopped noticing until someone presses exactly the right spot. I turned slowly, and there he was. Ryan. 3 feet away, in a blazer that needed pressing, holding a drink, wearing that smile, the one that looked warm from a distance and felt cold the moment you were close enough to feel it properly. His eyes moved over my dress, over the diamonds at my throat, over the glittering deck stretched behind me, and something ugly moved across his face. Something I recognized immediately because I had spent 2 years watching it arrive. It was the look he used to get whenever I wore something that made me feel good about myself. The look that said, without a single word, you are not allowed to feel that way. Still pretending, Mia? His voice was loud enough for the people nearest to us to turn their heads. I kept my voice completely even. Ryan, you need to leave. He laughed. Not a real one. The kind that lives right on the edge of something terrible. His eyes swept the deck one final time, and then, without any warning at all, he reached out, picked up my untouched champagne glass, and poured it directly and deliberately over my head. The music kept playing for 3 full seconds. That was the worst part. The song kept going while champagne ran cold down my face, soaked through my hair, spread dark across the back of my white dress, and Ryan laughed, and 40 people stared, and not one single person moved. Then, from the far end of the deck, a man set his drink down on the railing. He had not moved yet, but his eyes were already fixed on Ryan with a stillness so complete and so deliberate that every person standing near him took one slow step backward without understanding why they were doing it. I did not know his name yet. I would by morning, and Ryan would spend the rest of his life wishing he had never reached for that glass. Let me take you back, because none of what happened that night makes any sense without the beginning. 2 years before the yacht party, I was 27 years old, working as an events coordinator at a mid-sized maritime company called Vega Events. I was good at my job, genuinely good. Sharp eye for detail, strong memory for client preferences, the kind of calm under pressure that my manager Carol said she rarely saw in someone my age. But inside my own life, things were quieter than they should have been. Smaller than they should have been. And I had been telling myself for so long that quiet and small were the same thing as stable that I had almost stopped questioning it. Ryan had come into my life 3 years before that night, at a rooftop launch event I had coordinated. He was charming the way that certain men are, magnetic in a room, funny in front of people, the kind of person who remembered your coffee order and made you feel chosen just by the specific way he looked at you across a crowd. I fell for it completely. I was 24 and I had not yet learned to look past the performance to see what was underneath it. Within 8 months of being with him, I had stopped applying for a senior coordinator position because Ryan said the extra hours would make me difficult to be around. Within a year, I had stopped calling Dana as regularly because Ryan said she was a bad influence who encouraged unnecessary drama in my life. Within 2 years, I had quietly and carefully dismantled every version of myself that Ryan found inconvenient and replaced her with a smaller, more manageable model that seemed to cause fewer problems. The breakup, when it came, was not dramatic. It never is with men like him. I came home one afternoon to find his coworker Priya's bracelet sitting on my bathroom shelf and Ryan at the kitchen table looking not guilty, just mildly inconvenienced that I had found out before he was ready to handle it on his own terms. I packed one bag. I stayed at Dana's for 6 weeks. I got up every morning, went to work, and rebuilt myself the way you rebuild after a flood, testing every floor before trusting it to hold weight. By the time I was assigned to coordinate a private charter for a significant new client, I had fully convinced myself I was fine. I was mostly right. What I had not yet accounted for was that Ryan was not finished with me. And that sometimes the universe delivers justice through a door you never once thought to open. 3 weeks before the yacht party, my manager Carol called me into her office and slid a contract across her desk with both hands, which she had never done before in the 3 years I had worked for her. "This is the largest single booking Vega has ever handled," she said. "The client is registered as Park Group. Mr. Jiho Park." She paused, and something in her expression shifted slightly. "Whatever Mr. Park needs, it gets done. No delays. No questions." I took the contract home that evening and typed his name into my browser almost casually, the way you look someone up before a first meeting just to have a basic picture. Then I set my fork down and did not pick it up again for a long time. Jiho Park, 37. Owner of 2 international shipping groups, a luxury hospitality chain operating across 4 countries, and a private security firm working across Southeast Asia. His photograph showed a composed man in a dark suit with the kind of stillness about him that even a photograph managed to catch somehow. Further down, other things. A federal investigation in Singapore closed, no charges filed. A business profile describing his influence as extending considerably beyond what any public record could document. One line in a financial column that I read twice: "Park does not make threats. He makes decisions." I closed the laptop. Then I opened it and read everything again more carefully. I sat with it for a long time that night. The kind of man those articles described was not a simple client. But the opportunity in that contract was the biggest of my professional career, and I had spent 2 years carefully rebuilding a version of myself who did not shrink from rooms before she had been given a real reason to. I showed up to the consultation the next morning with my full portfolio and my complete attention. Jiho Park was already seated when I arrived. He stood when I walked in, which almost no client ever did, and said, before I could set my bag down, "You researched me." It was not a question. I met his eyes and did not pretend otherwise. I did. He nodded, the way someone nods when they receive an expected answer and are entirely unbothered by it. "Good," he said. "I researched you as well. Shall we begin?" The consultation was scheduled for 90 minutes. It ran 6 hours. Not because the logistics were unusually complicated, though they were, but because Jiho Park asked questions that no client had ever asked me before. Not just what I recommended, but why. Not just the plan, but the reasoning and instinct behind every decision. He listened to my answers with the kind of attention that made my thinking feel genuinely worth something, which I had spent 2 years quietly forgetting was possible. At the end, as I was gathering my notes, he said evenly, "The guest list includes a man named Ryan Choi. He is attending as an associate of one of my business contacts. I understand you have a prior personal connection to him." My hand stilled on my portfolio for exactly 1 second. "We have a history, yes?" Jiho held my gaze. "I want you to know that his invitation was not arranged by me. My contact added him independently. I am telling you this because I believe you deserve to make an informed choice about whether you remain as coordinator for this event." The offer was genuine. I could hear it clearly. But underneath it, I also heard something else, a man who had investigated my background thoroughly enough to know about Ryan, who chose to tell me directly instead of managing it quietly, who was now sitting completely still and waiting for my answer without any pressure at all. "I will remain on the event," I said. "I am very good at my job." The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but the thing that lives 1 degree away from one. "I know," he said. "That is precisely why I requested you specifically." I was 3 blocks from the building before I noticed that my hands were shaking. I stood on the pavement and took 3 slow breaths and told myself it was the cold evening air. Even then, standing alone on that pavement, I knew that was not what it was. 2 days later, I was at Dana's kitchen table, eating noodles, describing the event brief in what I genuinely believed was a perfectly professional tone, when Dana put down her chopsticks and simply stared at me. "You're talking about a client," she said. "Why do you sound like that?" I told her she was imagining things. She told me I was deflecting. We went around it for 15 comfortable minutes the way people do when they know each other well enough to argue without it meaning anything harmful. Then she said something that stayed in my chest for days. "Ryan spent 2 years convincing you that your instincts about people were broken. But your instincts have never once been wrong, Mia. The problem was you stopped trusting them." That night, a message arrived from an unknown number. Just 5 words, the Yacht. Friday. Dress well. Jay. I stared at the screen for a long time. I knew exactly who Jay was. What I didn't know, what I would only discover later, when it would reframe everything, was that Jiho had known for 2 full weeks exactly what Ryan was planning to do that night. He had known. And he had already made his decisions accordingly. The evening of the yacht party arrived warm and golden, the kind of night that feels purpose-built to be remembered. I had spent 4 days finalizing every detail of the event, the amber deck lighting that deepened after 9, the playlist that moved from elegant background music to something with more energy as the evening progressed, The champagne that cost more than most people's rent and tasted precisely like it should. Everything was exactly right. It was my job to make it that way, and I was very good at my job. I had also done one quiet thing I mentioned to nobody. I had asked the yacht's head of security to add one name to the internal watch list. Not removed, just flagged, just monitored. My supervisor approved the request without asking why, which told me a quiet word had come down from somewhere considerably above both of us. Ryan arrived at 8 with his associate, already moving through the crowd, already performing the version of himself that had once convinced me he was worth loving. He hadn't seen me yet. I watched him from the upper deck and felt something I could not immediately name, not fear, not the old tight anxiety that used to arrive in my chest whenever he entered a room I was standing in. Something cleaner than that. A settled, clear-eyed recognition. Like standing in a room with every light on at once and nothing left in the shadows. Jiho arrived at 8:40. 2 men flanked him at a careful distance, and the crowd shifted around him without him asking it to, the way water moves around something solid, naturally, without resistance. He found my eyes across the deck immediately, directly, without any searching at all. He gave one small, brief nod. Not a greeting exactly. More like a quiet confirmation. I see you. I am here. Ryan spotted me at 9:15. I watched his face cycle through surprise, then calculation, then the thing that lived underneath both, the restless, driving need to reassert a version of me that had not existed for 2 years. He started walking toward me. I did not step back. I did not turn away. I had spent too long leaving rooms before I was given a real reason to, and I was done with that. What happened in the 4 minutes that followed changed everything that came after. After the champagne. After the 3 seconds of music still playing while it ran cold down my face. After 40 people stared and nobody moved, the silence stretched out long and complete and impossibly cold. Then Jiho Park began crossing the deck. He did not rush. People would describe this afterward, the ones who were present, the ones who later posted about it carefully without using names. They would say the most frightening thing was not what he said. It was the way he moved. Unhurried. Deliberate. Like a man who had decided every detail of what was about to happen and was simply covering the distance between the decision and the outcome. He stopped beside me first. Not in front of Ryan. Beside me. He took the jacket from his own shoulders, dark, perfectly cut, and placed it carefully around me without once looking away from my face. His expression was entirely unreadable except for his eyes, which were doing something precise and controlled that made the 2 men standing nearest Ryan take 1 step backward without seeming to realize they had moved. Then, only then, he turned to face Ryan. He did not speak immediately. He let Ryan stand inside the silence, inside all those staring eyes, inside the slow and terrible realization that the room had shifted. Not toward Ryan. Away from him. In the instinctive way people move when they have suddenly identified which person in a space is genuinely, quietly dangerous. Ryan was still holding his empty glass. His smile had gone uncertain at the edges. You just made a serious mistake, Jiho said. Quietly. Almost pleasantly. I would like you to think very carefully about what you choose to do in the next 30 seconds. Ryan laughed. It lasted about 4 seconds. Then it stopped completely, and the silence that replaced it was an entirely different kind. What Ryan did not know, what he could not possibly have known, was what he had actually walked into that night. In the 48 hours before the party, Jiho's team had completed a background check on Ryan that had started as routine screening and grown into something considerably more significant. Ryan, in the 14 months since our breakup, had taken a senior position at a maritime investment firm called Sterling Meridian. Sterling Meridian had been quietly trying to acquire control of one of Jiho's primary shipping routes through a chain of anonymous shell companies, a strategy designed specifically to hide who was behind the purchase. Jiho's financial team had traced it back to Sterling Meridian 6 weeks earlier and had been building a legal case ever since. Ryan had no idea about me and Jiho. He had come to that party for one reason only, to publicly humiliate a woman he could not stand seeing do well. He had walked directly into the center of something much larger, wearing the kind of blinders that come from a lifetime of never facing real consequences. "Who are you?" Ryan asked. His voice had lost every trace of performance. Jiho answered in 3 quiet words. Then Ryan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He looked at the screen. The color left his face completely and all at once. I woke the next morning in a hotel suite I did not immediately recognize. Clean, quiet, wide windows looking out over the harbor, early lights sitting flat and pale on the water below. On the bedside table was a glass of water and a small folded note in neat, unhurried handwriting. "You do not owe anyone an explanation for last night. Rest well. Jay." I sat with that note in my hands for a long time. Then I showered, dressed in the clothes that had been pressed and left on the chair, and found Jiho on the suite's small terrace with 2 coffees and the city beginning its morning below him. He asked if I was okay before he said anything else. I said yes, then changed my answer to mostly, which was more honest. He nodded as if mostly was a completely reasonable place to be and slid the second coffee across the table without comment. We talked for 2 hours. He told me about Sterling Meridian, about the shell companies, about Ryan's position at the center of an acquisition strategy that Jiho's legal team had been documenting for 6 weeks. He told me that Ryan's attendance at the party had been known before either of us stepped onto that boat, that he had placed 2 members of his security team near me from the moment Ryan arrived, and that he was sorry he had not found a way to prevent what happened rather than simply containing the damage after the fact. "You knew," I said. "You knew what he might do, and you didn't tell me." "I anticipated," he said carefully. "There is a difference. And I should have done more with that information." I looked at him across the table. Most people would have simply had him removed early. Most people, he said, were not watching your face when you stepped onto that deck and realized he was already there. You didn't flinch. You held yourself completely steady. I was not going to treat you like someone who needed to be managed or protected from the room she was standing in. I did not have an answer for that. What I had instead was the quiet, unfamiliar sensation of being correctly understood, of someone seeing me clearly and accurately, without adjusting what they saw to suit themselves. It sat in my chest like warmth I had not realized I was cold without. By 10 that morning, my phone had over 50 notifications. The yacht's social media stream had been running during the incident, not capturing clear audio but showing enough. Someone had clipped 20 seconds of footage, the champagne, the long silence, Jiho crossing the deck, the jacket placed around my shoulders, and the precise moment Ryan's posture changed from aggressor to something considerably smaller. The clip was moving across platforms, and the comments were not what I had prepared myself for. I had expected mockery. The particular kind of public cruelty the internet saves for women who are visibly humiliated in front of a crowd. Instead, the comments were focused almost entirely on Jiho. On the jacket. On the way he moved across that deck. On the 3 quiet words he said that the audio barely caught, but that half the comment section was actively debating. Dana texted, "I don't know who he is, but our whole office has watched this on a loop." I typed back, "He's just a client." I stared at those 4 words for a moment. Then I deleted them without sending. Jiho's phone rang at 11. One side of a brief, calm conversation. When he set it down, he said, "A clip has been posted online. Before my team acts, do you want it removed or left as it is?" I thought about 40 people on that deck who watched and stayed perfectly still. I thought about every room I had made myself smaller in so that Ryan could feel bigger. About all the years I had told myself that being invisible was the same thing as being safe. "Leave it," I said. Something shifted in Jiho's expression, not quite a smile, but the thing that lives directly beside one. "Good," he said simply. 2 days later, Jiho asked me to come to his office for a follow-up meeting. His desk held, slightly to the left of center, a folder that was not hidden and not prominently placed, simply present, the way things are left by careful people who want them found by observant ones. By the 4th page, I had to set it down and press my hands flat against the desk. Ryan had not just been involved in Sterling Meridian's strategy. He had designed a specific method of using personal connections to gather intelligence on target companies. The folder documented that he had known about my professional connection to Jiho for 3 weeks before the party. That the champagne had not been impulsive. It had been scripted. A calculated public humiliation designed to damage my credibility in Jiho's professional world. "He used me as a business strategy," I said. My voice came out completely even. "Yes," Jiho said. The harbor moved below the window. The room was very quiet. Priya, the woman whose bracelet had ended my relationship with Ryan, sent a message on a Tuesday afternoon. No greeting. No small talk. Just, "I need to tell you something about the yacht party." He told me what he was going to do beforehand. I didn't stop him. I should have. "Can we meet?" I showed it to Jiho without a word. He read it once. "Your decision entirely," he said. I met her 3 days later at a busy cafe near my office. She arrived before me and she looked different from when I had last seen her, thinner, moving with more care, in the particular deliberate way of someone managing pain they have decided not to display. She was wearing foundation that was working harder than it should have needed to along her jaw. She talked without being prompted. She said Ryan had described his plan 4 days in advance. That it was not spontaneous, not the result of too much to drink and a moment of poor judgment. It was specific and considered. He had described exactly what he intended to do and exactly why, to make sure my name was permanently attached to a public embarrassment rather than a successful career. He wanted witnesses. He wanted cameras. He wanted everyone in my professional world to see me small and drenched and humiliated in front of the most significant client I had ever worked with. "I knew," she said, looking directly at me. And I said nothing because I was afraid of what he would do if I did. She reached into her bag and placed a small USB drive on the table between us. "He records strategy meetings at Sterling Meridian. I have been copying them for 6 months. I didn't know what to do with them, but I think I know now." I picked up the drive. My hand was completely steady. "I know exactly what to do with them," I said. Jiho watched the recordings without any visible reaction, the focused stillness of a man processing information he intends to use with precision. The first 3 sessions were dense and legally significant: shell company structures, false documentation, payment approvals with no legitimate line item attached. The 4th recording was different. In it, Ryan said my name, casually, mid-sentence, as if I were simply a variable in a calculation. He described my history, 2 years of carefully reducing my confidence, as making me reliably reactive to public pressure. He discussed me the way a person discusses a tool they have already tested and broken down and understand completely. Jiho paused the screen. The room went silent. He turned to look at me. "Are you okay?" The words were low and careful, and they carried something underneath them that was different from every other time he had asked that question. I looked at the paused image Ryan mid-sentence, completely unbothered, building a strategy from my old wounds. Something inside me went very still. Not the frozen kind. The decided kind. Play the rest, I said. When it finished, Jiho stood, walked to the window, and made one phone call. 3 sentences in Korean. Then he set the phone down. "This will be handled," he said. I believed him. 8 days later, I found out what those 3 sentences had set in motion. Ryan, watching sterling meridian crack under Jiho's legal filings, made the decision Jiho had apparently anticipated. He called a financial journalist with an offer, private information about Jiho Park in exchange for protection and favorable coverage. The journalist had worked alongside Jiho for 9 years. He recorded the entire conversation with Ryan's knowledge, framing it as standard professional practice. Ryan talked freely, far too freely. In his desperation to sound valuable, he described Sterling Meridian's internal operations in specific, damaging detail. His own direct involvement in every layer of it, recorded clearly, reached the district attorney's office before the week ended. Gio told me over dinner, his voice carrying the settled quality of a man watching something unfold exactly as he had expected. "You knew he would do that," I said. "I thought he might," he said. "Men who feel cornered try to trade their way free." He had nothing of real value to offer about me. He had everything to offer about himself. I looked at him steadily. "The folder on your desk. Was it left there on purpose?" A brief pause. "It was left where someone paying attention might find it." I looked at the ceiling. Then back at him. "How many steps ahead are you at any given moment?" He considered this seriously. "Enough," he said. Jiho's mother arrived from Seoul on a Wednesday with 2 pieces of luggage and the kind of stillness that told me immediately which parent he had inherited his composure from. Mrs. Park was precise and elegant, with eyes that completed a full assessment of every room she entered and every person standing in it. Her English was selective. She understood considerably more than she chose to speak, which I identified within 10 minutes and adjusted for carefully from that point forward. She watched me constantly and said very little. At breakfast. Across the dinner table. In the small unguarded moments when she likely assumed I was not paying attention. I could not read what she was deciding about me, and the uncertainty sat in my chest with a specific weight, the kind that comes from genuinely caring what someone thinks before you know whether you have earned it. On the 3rd evening, Jiho's closest associate, a quiet, serious man named Mr. Seo, who had worked alongside Jiho for 11 years, pulled me aside before dinner. He said without introduction, "He has not laughed like this in 7 years. Whatever you are doing, do not stop." I asked carefully what had happened 7 years ago. Mr. Seo looked at me for a moment. He had a son, 3 years old. There was an accident on one of the shipping routes. It is not my story to tell in full, but it is why he rebuilt everything from the beginning and became who he is now. He said nothing more. I stood in that hallway for a long time after he walked away, thinking about the weight Jiho carried every single day without ever letting it bend him visibly, and understanding for the first time the true size of what he had trusted me with by opening his life and allowing me inside it. Mrs. Park arranged a private morning with me by sending Jiho on a transparently manufactured errand. She sat across from me with 2 teas and her translation app open on the table between us. She typed carefully and turned the screen. I did not support this at first. Not because of anything about you. Because I was afraid of watching my son disappear into grief again. I held her gaze and waited. She typed again. I changed my mind because of something I saw at a harbor restaurant 3 weeks ago. A server knocked a full tray against your table. Jiho moved to help immediately. But you were already moving before him, not because anyone was watching, simply because it was the natural thing to do. She slid a small box across the table. Inside was a bracelet, dark polished wood with thin silver inlay, old and simple and clearly carefully kept. Her final message read, "My son has resources and influence. What he needed was someone with character. That cannot be purchased." I put the bracelet on with hands that were not entirely steady. That evening Jiho came home and stopped moving the moment he saw it on my wrist. He stood very still, looking at it. Then he said he needed a minute and walked out to the terrace. When I followed him, he told me about his son, the accident, the 3 days on a search vessel, the bracelet he had kept because he could not let it go without first understanding what it was still meant for. "She was right," he said quietly, looking at my wrist. "My mother is almost always right." Ryan was arrested on a Thursday morning. Financial fraud, criminal conspiracy, and witness intimidation. Priya's police report, the USB recordings, the documented evidence, and Ryan's own recorded phone call formed what the district attorney's office publicly described as an unusually comprehensive package. I sat at Jiho's kitchen table and waited for the sharp satisfaction I had assumed would come. What arrived instead was quieter and deeper, a slow structural release, like a building finally allowed to stop bracing against a weight it was never designed to carry. My shoulders dropped. I breathed out slowly, and it felt like something that had been waiting 2 years for permission to leave. "I thought I would feel more," I told Jiho. "You feel exactly the right amount," he said. This was never about him. It was about getting back the space he took from you. With Ryan's arrest came a problem I had not anticipated. My name appeared in the press coverage, not prominently, but present. 2 articles named me as a personal connection to the defendant. One ran my photograph alongside his. In the comments beneath one of the articles, someone posted my home address. Jiho had us moved within 3 hours. No debate, no lengthy discussion. One instruction to Mr. CO, one call to the security team, one bag packed by my own hands while Jiho's lead security officer, a broad-shouldered, quiet man named Kang, held the front door without expression. Priya came with us. Her name had appeared in a reply thread beneath the address post, and when I mentioned it to Jiho, he said 2 words to Kang, "Expand the detail." That was the entire conversation. The source of the address post was traced within 18 hours. A paralegal inside the district attorney's office, privately paid by Sterling Meridian's most senior partner, a man named Hargrove, who had not appeared in any public reporting, but whose name had been present in Jiho's investigation for weeks. Hargrove had been feeding case timeline information to Sterling Meridian's remaining leadership throughout the prosecution. The entire case had been quietly, systematically compromised from the inside. Jiho's legal team filed an emergency motion to transfer the case to federal jurisdiction. It was an aggressive move. High risk. And, as I would come to understand, exactly right. When I arrived at the strategy meeting, Jiho's lead attorney glanced at me once and then looked at Jiho with a clear, unspoken question. Jiho said without pausing, "She stays." 5 people around the conference table moving quickly through the details of the federal transfer motion. The attorney was working through a critical timeline gap, a window between when Sterling Meridian's acquisition had stalled and when Hargrove's first documented payment arrived. The current evidence did not cover that window cleanly. I listened carefully. 3 years of coordinating complex events with multiple moving parts had given me a particular skill, building detailed mental maps of timelines, tracking the gaps between what was documented and what was merely assumed. "There is a specific date in Priya's recordings," I said. The table went quiet. She dated every session without fail. There is a recording where Ryan references an authorization email and gives a date. That date sits directly inside the window you are describing. The attorney pulled up the fourth recording. 41 minutes in, Ryan mentioned an approval specific, dated, traceable. The attorney looked at the screen, then at Jiho. That opens a server backup, he said slowly. 3 years of internal communications. If Hargrove's name runs through it. It will, Jiho said quietly. It did. I gave my formal federal statement the following Tuesday and walked out to find Mr. Seo beginning a slow, deliberate clap in the hallway. Kong was actually smiling, which was the most expressive I had ever seen him. Jiho was leaning against the wall beside the door with the look on his face that I had learned to absorb in careful doses because it was too full to take all at once. Hargrove's attorneys filed a countermotion claiming Jiho's involvement constituted witness tampering. It generated 48 hours of loud headlines. Jiho put his phone face down at 7 on the second evening and did not touch it again. Aren't you following this? I asked. The motion will be dismissed, he said simply. Watching coverage of something I already know the outcome of is not a useful way to spend an evening. He looked at me. Tell me about the Horizon Gala. You mentioned a catering issue. I looked at him. Then I told him about the catering issue. We spent 40 minutes on the logistics of an event with nothing to do with any of this. It was the most grounding conversation I had managed in weeks. The motion was dismissed the following morning. On a Thursday evening, following a meeting with a senior federal official who shook my hand and confirmed that the cooperation provided had been the decisive factor in the case, Jiho said on the drive home, 2 weeks. Somewhere no one knows either of our names. This is not negotiable. We left for Jeju Island on a Saturday. A house on a cliff. White walls. Wide windows. The ocean audible from every room, exactly as promised. On the fourth morning, Jiho looked at his phone at breakfast and something shifted in his expression. We needed to return 2 days early. A final development in the Hargrove case. Being handled. I was not in danger. I asked if he was. He paused 1 beat too long. We landed to find Priya standing 10 feet behind Mr. Seo at arrivals, holding a paper cup in both hands, her left eye carrying the fading yellow traces of a bruise that had clearly been much worse a week before. Hargrove's final attempt at pressure had come through a private investigator sent to her temporary address. She had called Kong. He arrived in under 4 minutes. Hargrove accepted a plea within 72 hours. Ryan's charges held. The federal office issued a statement that ran in every publication that had previously run the counter-motion coverage, replacing those headlines with something truer. A package arrived at the new apartment on a Tuesday morning with no return address and clean, careful handwriting on the outside. Inside was a framed photograph taken on the yacht, in the first golden hour of the evening, before everything. In it, I was standing at the upper deck railing with my head tipped back, laughing with my whole face, completely open, at something Jiho had apparently just said quietly into my ear. I did not remember the moment being captured. But I looked entirely, undeniably, completely like myself. Not the careful, contained version. Not the small, permission-asking version. The real one. On the back, in Priya's handwriting, this is what you look like when you are not performing. Keep it. I placed the photograph on the mantel without saying a word. That evening the apartment held the fullest version of the life I had been quietly building one honest step at a time. Jiho at the kitchen counter with his sleeves rolled up and his phone face down on the surface. Dana on the sofa arguing with Mrs. Park through the translation app about the correct preparation of a dish they were both apparently the world's leading experts on. Priya at the table with her laptop, 3 weeks into a new professional role she had found through Jiho's network, sleeping through the night again for the first time in months. I stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the sitting room and just watched it for a moment before anyone noticed I was there. The noise of it, the warmth, the ordinary, remarkable weight of a life that was actually the right size. I had not needed saving. I had needed time. And I had needed someone who was willing to stand exactly as they were, honest, patient, completely themselves, long enough for me to remember who I had always been underneath everything Ryan had so carefully, so systematically removed. 6 months later, I stood at the entrance of the Horizon Grand Ballroom and looked out at 400 guests and the largest event of my professional life. Every detail chosen by me. Every vendor agreement signed by me. My name on the proposal. My vision on every surface of that room. My manager introduced me to the assembled clients as the coordinator who had turned the most talked about event of the previous year into a career-defining moment. That was accurate. It also missed everything that actually mattered. But I let it stand because I no longer needed anyone else to explain my story correctly in order to know what it meant. Ryan was in a federal facility. Hargrove's assets were being processed through the courts. Sterling Meridian had been formally dissolved. Priya had testified in the civil proceedings and was building her life in a city that did not contain a single person who had ever tried to make her smaller. Jiho arrived at the gala at 9. Not as my client, that contract had closed professionally 6 months prior. As my guest, the room registered the difference in the quiet, instinctive way rooms register things that genuinely matter. He crossed to me the way he always had, directly, without searching, as if there were never any question about where I was. He straightened the strap of my dress where it had shifted slightly and asked how the evening was going. I told him honestly, really well, because that was how things were between us. Honest. Always. Even when honest was complicated and required more than one try to get right. Later, on the venue terrace with the city spread out below us in light, I told him the version of my life I had once imagined before Ryan arrived and began quietly editing it. The career. The confidence. The simple, uncomplicated feeling of being fully present in my own existence without first asking whether it was allowed. Jiho listened to every word without interruption. Then he said, quietly and with complete certainty, that woman was always here. She was simply waiting for conditions that did not require her to be smaller than she actually is. I leaned into him. The city moved below us, alive and unhurried. The photograph was on the mantel at home. My sister was calling in the morning. The life I was living was the exact size it had always been meant to be. Not borrowed. Not managed. Not edited down to fit someone else's comfort. Mine. I had not needed someone to rescue me. I had needed someone honest enough and patient enough to stand beside me while I found my own way back. And in the end, through all the noise and the legal hearings and the quiet strategic moves and the moments on terraces watching cities at night, that was the only part of the whole story I would carry with me forever. Not what Ryan lost. Not what Jiho built. But what I found. What had been there the whole time, waiting for the right conditions to come home. If this story kept you here from the very first line all the way to this final word, then you already know why this channel exists. This is what we do here. Stories that are real and human and impossible to stop reading once you start. Stories about women who held on when it would have been easier to let go, who discovered that the life they deserved had been waiting for them all along. Before you go anywhere, drop your location in the comments right now. Your city, your country, what time it is where you are. I read every single comment and I love knowing exactly where in the world this story has reached. And if you are not subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notifications. Every single week there is a new story waiting here for you. You do not want to miss a single one. I will see you in the next story.